So the O5 concepts, the first thing is straight lines with the line segment tool. So all you have to do is you click and you can do a precise line, 3 inches long. I haven't set my units yet, but I seem to get a 3-inch line. Or you click and hold and drag and release. Click and hold, drag and release. And that gives you line segments. You can use your shift to constrain your line segment to 0, 45, 90, etc. Okay, if you want the precise line, all you're doing is clicking on the screen to get the dialog box. If you need to, generally, if you want a closed object that you end with, you don't really want to use this tool for it because these are two separate things. Like if I were to make a triangle here, I can't fill this because it's not a closed object. But there is a way that I can join these two anchor points, sort of glue them together, because if you can imagine right now, these 3 lines are on different stacking orders. Like one's here, and one's even lower in the stacking order. So you have to do it with your direct select tool, this one here, and you can marquee select around that corner and you get both nodes, and then you right click and you join them. And at a corner point, it's going to leave an anchor point that has no handles to manipulate. And when you do have an angle on there, that's what you want. So I'm going to say OK. Look, it's joined already. Okay, but at this point, we're not truly joined because if I come in here and if you look, there's one anchor point. Can you see? I'm not truly joined. So if I want that to be strictly a closed object, again, I have to join those 2 corner points. I don't know if you can see clearly, but they just join together. And the same with this corner over here. Right now, if I select them and right click and join, now this is truly a closed object. Okay, then we had the arc tool, and the arc tool is part of this tearaway here, and you can just click and hold and drag out and release where you want the arc. Usually it's easier to just get it in, and then if you need to manipulate after, you can go in with your direct select tool and use the handles or moving the nodes. You can also just click on the screen and type in some information to get something that's very accurate if you understand all this mathematical stuff. Okay, and then we had the pencil tool. So with the pencil tool, if you want to make a free-form path, you click and you hold and you drag to draw the path. So if I want to continue this existing path, then I have to come back to an endpoint. But it's still a little unpredictable because if I were to double back over this, sometimes it changes. So it's a little tricky. To connect 2 open paths, so let's say I have this and I have this, and I want them to be connected. It says select both paths, start dragging from the end of path A toward the other. Press and hold. So I assume I'm in the pencil tool. Press and hold the control key. So I'm going to come from this one to this one. I had to press the control key only after I started dragging, and I'm going to release my mouth first. Okay, and you can see that I ended up getting one entire path. So that's a little tricky. This is harder than Corel, I find in these little ways. If you have your pencil tool, and again you draw something and you come around to the beginning point, you might think that this is a closed object, but again, if you were to zoom in and you take your direct select tool, you can see that it isn't. So what you need to know is if you have your pencil tool and you know that you want to have a closed path, then you can start dragging, but then at some point put your Alt key on, and did you see the little icon change from the X to the little circle there? That's telling Illustrator to make it a closed path, and if we were to zoom in there, there are no unjoined anchor points. So that's the pencil tool, and that's a really common one if you are making a cartoon that you can use to get the general shape of where you want to go, and then do some node editing. So I can't decide, is this a horse or a dog? I don't know, but obviously I'm going to put my Alt on and I could make that joined, and I would have to go now and start playing with the anchor points to fine tune what you have. But that is a fast way to get a closed object and get a start to doing some custom work, as opposed to, please, I repeat, don't make the mistake of trying to work with the line segment tool, because you saw what happened. Every line segment is on a different stacking order. You have to join them all up. It's a nightmare. Use the pencil tool. If you have a very, very bumpy line with a pencil, it means that you have a lot of anchor points there, because every time you move your hand, Illustrator is going to throw in an anchor point to help define the geometry. And there is a tool called the smooth tool. I don't know, I never use it, but just so you know what it is, you click it, and then when you start running over these, it starts slowly deleting some or trying to smooth it out. Now, someone told me a trick the other day. They said press one of our keys. I can't remember if it was Alt, and it did it more quickly. And I do have Alt down and it is working. So I do not have that note in your handout. So you may want to add that, because Alt definitely speeded up that process. Okay, the erase tool. The truth is you need to learn how to draw what you want without reverting to too many fix-it-up tools. But just so we know what these will do, if I have a line, let's do one with the pencil tool, and let's do one with the line segment tool just to see if these are exactly the same. So what will the erase tool do? Because here's the erase tool. And I think people like to use that to erase color and stuff, and it's not meant like Photoshop. I don't know if that's what it does in Photoshop. It doesn't erase, big areas for you at all. It just is for using on a line segment. And after you do that, nothing happens. Which is Murphy's Law, that when I'm recording this, it won't work. So I may have to go. Oh, you know what? I didn't have it selected first. I'm going to say that that might be an important part of making this work. And it is. So there you go. This time it works. So don't forget to select it first, because it can't read your mind and know what it is that you are trying to erase. Even though you're actually erasing over that particular object, it didn't know. And furthermore, I did a whole number of erases there, and I'm thinking, I wonder how many. Did it add a whole bunch of nodes? Maybe it only requires one swipe across in order to break it. And that is true. You don't actually have to think about using a real eraser and rubbing it a few times. Just one little stroke over that will do the trick. Okay, the scissors. cuts an open path into two segments. So, you know, what's the difference? I really don't know. So I select it first and I'm going to click on it, and you can see immediately after I did that that these were going to be two different segments. Now the knife tool, and be careful because this one looks like a knife but it's the slice tool, so you don't, that's not the one I'm talking about. I'm talking about this one right here as the knife tool. So if you have a closed object, you can select it and then use the knife tool, and you drag the knife tool right across a closed object and then release. And when I get my selection tool, you can see that I have cut it in half, and they're now two separate entities on a different stacking order. Okay, the drop shadow. There's two kinds of drop shadows. So we have two rectangles here. Number 10 in your notes. Select an object, click on the menu, filter. So there's a drop shadow and filter, one in effect, and we're coming to this one in filter. Stylize, be careful. There's two stylizes here. How confusing is that? We're going to the top one, and we're going to do drop shadow, and we get this dialog box, and we have this create separate shadows. We can put a color on here, and let's say OK, and you can play with those, but again, if you're at home, take note of what your settings are before you play too much, because they may not revert. And I'm going to say OK, and there I have a drop shadow. So by default the create separate is checked, and to get rid of this drop shadow I would select this and I would ungroup it, and then when I click off and click back on, I can pull them apart from each other. If I make another rectangle after this, there's no drop shadow that appears as a result. The next one is the effect stylize drop shadow. This one here, stylize, make sure you only go to the top one, put the drop shadow on, and you can see it retained our settings from the last one. The opacity is your transparency, so if you want one less transparent you can play with that. I'll just say OK, and here it is on. Now if I click off and I click back on to select it and I right click, you can see I cannot ungroup this one. So the first time I did Illustrator I had no idea of this. Half the people use the filter drop shadow in the class, half the people, you know, they're close together, half the people use the effect. You know, we were in a mess because they do act differently. So this one you can't ungroup, but what you can do is you can edit this drop shadow after the fact. The drop shadow that we got from the filter menu, it cannot be edited afterward. So that's a difference. It can be ungrouped easily and separated, but it can't be edited. In this one here, if you get your appearance palette right here, and this is selected, you can see that you have a drop shadow right there. And if I double click on that, or I don't even know if I have to double click. Yeah, I do have to double click. I get my editing box back. So that's the difference between them. And I'm going to do one more here, back with the filter drop shadow. And you can see in the appearance palette it's different, isn't it? Can you see that? It's a group that shows here. There's nowhere to kind of double click and edit that, whereas in this one from the effect menu you can. Okay, so a little bit different. The next one on your handout, number 11, pixelate a vector image. You know, originally we were doing a lot of architectural stuff and we wanted to make a landscape, and we wanted to find a way to make some quick bushes or shrubs in there. So this was one way that we found to do it. And you know, these two menus have all sorts of effects that you guys probably already know from Photoshop if you've taken it. But in here we're concentrating on vector, but there's a few places we go and do them. I'm going to put my Alt key and make this a closed object. So there's a beautiful shrub. And now I am going to put a gradient fill on that. And I'm going to click my paint bucket. Remember, I'm going to shift click this little thing here and go back to this one and click this one. Go back to CMYK, and so I have a bit of shading on here. And I might even choose to make my outline a green color. And then I can go up to the Effect, Pixelate, Pointilize, and these all do some crazy things. But in this one here, when we pointilize it and just say OK, it'll look very different if we made big cells. It turns it kind of modern looking. But if I say OK at this point, you can see that I just got a very quick sort of illusion of 3D with having the darkness on that side of the shrub kind of idea. So just a fast effect that you might want to use. Number 12, we're leaving for the 06 concepts for the envelope. Number 13, straight lines with the pen tool. Okay, so we're sort of building up with some of these tools. I'm going to just do the tear off here. If we want straight lines with a pen tool, this is a much, I said don't make things with the line segment tool. But if you wanted to have something, a lot of straight lines, you can make it with this pen tool. And just a simple click is going to drop an anchor point where you click, and it's going to be joined with, and I'm going to change this back to default, and there you get something that they're not all separate, they're all on the same stacking order, it's all one unit. When you drop the anchor point using just those simple clicks, if you come back into the direct selection tool, you'll see that none of these anchor points have handles. Okay, that's called a simple corner anchor point. There's no handles because the handles are for manipulating curves. So you can do curves with the pen tool as well. You click the pen and you're going to click to drop the anchor point, but you're not going to release until you do a little drag. And the drag is going to affect the slope of the curve that comes out of it. I have seen some people that have, a friend of mine, her daughter went to Sheridan, and she can use the pen tool like you could not believe to draw stuff very, very quickly. I've had one or two people in my class when we did Illustrator as a whole separate class, it was actually in CorelDRAW, that can get very good at this. But it takes some practice. It's pretty tough to get exactly what you want. Like if I were to try and get that horse dog again, you know, it's not always so easy. I have an idea. I always know that the direction I drag is the direction I want the curve to, or the slope to go to, right? So you can get very accurate with your pen tool. And what I want you to notice is that when I was using that click and hold and drag, that drag is what gives you the handles. So when you go to your direct selection tool, do you see that each of these has a handle with it? Now we have three types of anchor points, and this one is going to be a smooth anchor point. And let's just zoom in and just quickly show you, because we have one more round with these anchor points for you to really understand them. But right now all I want to say is that a smooth anchor point, it can be very frustrating you are going to move one side of the handle and you get this line segment to do what you want, but you changed the line segment before it. It's like a wave in an ocean. Um, I can pull out the length of these and affect only this line, but as soon as it's like a teeter-totter. One side goes down, the other side goes up. So this drives people crazy. So in our next set of concepts, we'll go to the last type. But for now, this is what I want you to get used to.